Welcome everyone to the clash between India number one Arjun Erigaisi taking on Anish Giri. This is the battle between the PBG Alaskan Knights and the SG Alpine Pipers at the Tech Mahindra Global Chess League, and Anish Giri with the white pieces will be trying to take his revenge against Arjun. In their previous encounter, Arjun had beaten him in roughly 22 moves, and it was an impeccable game by Arjun Erigaisi. Anish today has an important game because his team has the chance to reach the finals. A handshake here and pawn to d4. Arjun brings out the knight, c4, g6. We have, is it going to be the King's Indian? Yes, it is. The King's Indian is on the board. Knight comes out to f3, black castles, bishop comes to e2, and now knight a6 with the idea of trying to play on the dark squares. e5 played, bishop comes out to e3. Now Arjun wants to secure the c5 knight for square for his knight. He plays queen to e7, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, and knight jumps into d5. The knight attacks the queen and also the knight on f6. The queen goes back and the e4 pawn is now hanging. So queen c2 defends e4. And now knight to g4. He attacks the bishop. You don't want to be giving up this bishop. But rook d1 played. Well, the knight can take the bishop now. And that's what Arjun does. You can look at the times on the clock of both the players showing that they are in their preparation still. Knight takes e3. The queen comes out to e7. And white is again going with his knight to d5. Queen e6 played here with the idea to kick the knight away. But Anish plays c5 and his point is bishop a6, knight c7, but c6 played. Now if you take here, I'm going to take on d5 followed by the bishop hanging. So that's the reason why the knight has to go back, and now knight c7 played by Arjun. Anish brings his knight to c4. He's angling at the d6 square. The queen comes back attacking the c5 pawn. And Anish jumps in with his knight to d6. b5 played here. Very interesting move. And I think taking en passant is possible. Also with the fact that Anish, if he gets a draw, his team comes closer to the finals. I think this is a pretty decent decision. Because now he can liquidate. Takes. Rook takes. And he's ready to take another pawn. By the way, the a2 pawn is hanging right now. So queen takes on c6. And now the knight can go to e6 and d4. Yeah, that's what he's doing. But he's going to drop another pawn. Rook, queen takes b6 is hanging. Anish is thinking, oh, he doesn't take it. He goes back. Because I think queen takes b6, he was a bit afraid that rook b8, b2 pawn hangs, then a2 hangs. So he comes back queen b5. Arjun now must chop off the pawn on a2. That's logical. He does it. He takes the pawn on a2. And Anish now be very slightly better because his bishop can get active on c4. And now he takes on b6, while the bishop on g7 is a bit passive. The rook comes back to a4 and Arjun wants to play rook b4 and attack the pawn on b2. Well, in such positions I often wonder, how is white actually in trouble? Because he's a pawn up, but the thing here is that black pieces are better positioned. So rook to a8 played, And now with bishop to b7, you have perhaps rook b8 here. And that could be trouble time because of the pin. So he plays bishop to b5. And now rook b4. Quite an important move, pinning the bishop. And Arjun finds it. Rook b4 on the board. The queen goes to c6, attacking the rook on a8. And queen to f8 played here. Queen goes to f8. And Anish thinking about what to do here. He's hesitating a lot. He plays his bishop back to d3. Rook comes to c8. Arjun is now trying to corner the queen. He's attacking the b2 pawn. The knight could jump to c5. He has his trump cards here. It's very little. And you can see the clock time though. Anish is down to half the time as compared to Arjun. 4 minutes. And now, do you want to capture the pawn on b2? No, he goes knight c5. Queen comes to a5. And here's a small imbalance that can be created now. And Arjun finds this very interesting because, look, you can take on b2 here. But instead, he takes on d3, rook d3 and picks up the e4 pawn. And this is a very interesting imbalance created because now you have 4 pawns here. White has 3 and there's 1 extra pawn here. So rook d1, threatening to come down to d8. The rook comes to c4 and Arjun's very tricky. It's rook d8, I take, and if you take with the rook, there's rook c1, which is a back rank issue. But he goes rook d7 here. Anish with 3 minutes 42 seconds. Arjun has 7 minutes 20 seconds. Pawn comes up to h6, taking away the g5 square from the knight. e4 could be a massive threat here. I mean, nothing's a massive move here in the sense that white is close to equal, but the problem is in such positions you want it to be clean draw. You don't want to take chances. By the way, just to tell you, if knight e5, rook c5 would win back the piece. So that's the reason why h3. And now rook c5. The queen goes to b6. Just calmly trying to push forward. b4, b5. Rook goes to b8. And now maybe you can take on b8, queen b8 and rook d8 check, where you are able to kind of get rid of few pieces on the board. And he does it. Queen b8, queen takes b8, and now rook d8 check. Takes, and Arjun getting a bit excited there. King h7 played. And what is Anish going to do next? He pushes his pawn to g4. But now we have e4 followed by f5 coming in. He played it. e4 on the board. Amazing chess. The knight needs to move now. But where exactly? Knight d4 makes sense because of check and rook d1. He goes knight to d2. Pawn comes up to f5. And white takes. Black takes. Two central pawns looking dangerous here. Now rook to b5 at some point. b2 could also be bit soft. Anish is within the drawing margins, but not so easy. He attacks the rook with b4. Arjun goes rook to b5. Now difficult to defend this pawn because rook d4, there is bishop looking here. I mean, it's not at all easy. Knight f1 to e3 could be an idea to put pressure on the pawn on f5. Like something like knight f1, rook b4, rook d5. Here, let's imagine knight f1, rook b4, rook d5, attacking here, f4, rook f5, f3, and just trying to hold this somehow. This position could be the point. But Anish, you can see the tension and the pressure as he comes down to just 25 seconds. He plays rook c8. It's not the kind of move that he wants to play. Rook takes b4, rook c2 coming back. But now Arjun is clearly better. He's going to bring his king in. King g6, a good move. King comes up to g2 and there is f4, f3 coming in. One small solace for Anish is that the remaining h pawn is a wrong colored pawn. So if he's able to give up his knight to trade these two pawns and also trade off the rooks, it would be a draw. So still possibilities do exist of white holding this position. King g2, Arjun trying to think what's the right way to press the position. You want to play f4, but maybe not too soon. Maybe this is the right moment with the e4 pawn defended. Arjun here, you can see he's making use of his 2 minutes 50 seconds very, very smartly. He's ready with his move. And it's typical Arjun that before he makes his move, he kind of holds his hand there and pushes king to g5. Well, Anish Giri now has to decide if he wants to trade the rooks with rook c4. It's possible to play it. He goes knight to f1 with 8 seconds left. 1 minute 43 seconds for Arjun. And maybe it's time to now push the f pawn. This seems like the right move. He goes bd3, knight to g3. The problem is you can't play f4 now. e4 is hanging. Will Anish be able to hold a draw here? Will Arjun Erigaisi convert this very, very equal position? That would be something to beat Anish from that equalish position. He goes bishop b6. Rook goes to c8, but now rook b2. He misses this point. Anish had rook g8 on his mind, but king comes to f4. Knight h1. Oof. This is the kind of move you don't want to make, and Anish knows that he's going to lose. Bishop f2, knight f2 and e3 is winning. He goes directly e3. Rook goes to e8. And now e takes f2 is winning. He goes e2. And Arjun picks up the queen. Knight comes to g3. He makes a queen here. Rook takes. And now rook takes on f2. He's going to lose the knight next. He takes it and Anish Giri resigns there. He's shaking his head. He's missed a very important game for his team. He gets up very quickly to look at the scoreboard. Are they going to the finals or not is the big question. And Anish very worried here because Arjun beat him. Gukesh beat Fabiano. But it was Ho Yifan who managed to save the day for the team with then 3 draws. And look at Prague, Anish and everyone there in the background as Arjun gets up